Hey, Kate here with Wild Sacred Journey. So I'll jump on the bandwagon of sharing some thoughts about reconnecting with the season, because I actually think there's a journey here. So most of us start, and part of why we start reconnecting with the seasons is because we burn out really badly, particularly in these shorter days in the Northern Hemisphere. This is anyway, in the shorter days of winter. Because so much of our modern society expects us to be constantly on, expects us to be productive at the same level as during the summer, and that's just not how our bodies work. That's not ancestrally how we've ever functioned. It's not how nature works. And our bodies, remember, are creatures, not machines. And so our bodies are going to respond to the seasons more the way creatures would, rather than how machines would. So we start to feel this need to reconnect with the seasons when we've kind of keep burning out, right? And then we start to either get this inkling ourselves, or now it feels like there's a lot more of this kind of rhetoric floating around on the internet at this time. But we might see like a permission slip from somebody or something like that to like rest and hibernate and be a creature. And that's really great. That's a great starting point. So we start there and we start to realize, wow, this does feel a lot better. It may still take courage. There may be a lot of pushback. It may be really challenging to kind of like buck the grain. But we notice that as we do, we feel better. So, okay. I will submit though that that's just the second step, right? Is like implementing it in that sense. And so, I'm becoming aware, because I'm seeing so much more on the internet right now about like January is not the time for growth, and put away the vision boards, and some of that kind of stuff. And that this isn't the new year ancestrally. The new year would have been in the spring and things like that. And again, there may be some parts of the world ancestrally where that's true. Certainly cultures that follow the lunar calendar, the new lunar year is more in February usually. So they're not celebrating the new year at this point. So I am speaking in generalizations that are not necessarily true for every ancestral culture. But there's a little bit of a trend here that I'm realizing that while at one point in time it was really helpful for me to think about things that way, that this was not the new year, that this was not the time for growth, yada, 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 that the more I'm seeing that, 5 to 10 years down the road of this journey for me, the more I'm realizing that's like not the whole picture actually. And that's, like I said, kind of more the second step. So there's another layer. Once we've kind of started giving ourselves permission to rest more at this time of year, there's another layer that I think we can get into, which is that this actually is the time of New Year, and this actually is the time of growth, but not growth in the way that capitalism would have us picture growth, right? Capitalism has us picture growth actually, like growth in capitalist mindset is almost more synonymous with harvesting. Right? So it's actually more like once all the fruit has grown and we're taking it and now we're selling it and we're creating money from it, right? So that's actually more this idea. So there's this sense that growth is this really active, outward facing thing that's also more about reaping the rewards of our hard work. And the tricky piece with that is that it negates all the little steps that go into getting us to that point. It's part of this, I would submit it's not actually different from the fact that when you go online and you watch time-lapse videos of things, right? It like glosses over. You watch home improvement shows and it's like they show a little bit of the construction, but in a 22-minute episode, they've taken a house from old to demolished to new, right? And so somewhere along the way, we don't see all the little steps. So there's something in our culture that's slowly erasing like our ability to know what goes into the creation of things. And some of that is also because we're disconnecting from these more agricultural models. So I worked on a farm for years. One of my favorite things to do on the farm was actually to work in the greenhouse. So I loved the magic of putting the seeds in, like of getting the soil right, because there is an art actually to getting the soil just right for the seeds, right? The right amount of compost, the right amount of moisture, putting the seeds in. And there's an art to putting the seeds in, how deep you put them and all that kind of stuff. Different seeds like different amounts of depth. And then keeping them watered, keeping them the right temperature, keeping them all of those things. And not each seed needs the exact same things. There's similarities, but not everything needs the same. And then waiting for them to grow. And once they start pushing up, then they have different needs too. And eventually, you know, you have to take them out and start getting them ready for the real world, right? Call it hardening off. And then you take them out and you actually put them in the field. And then you have to tend them in the field for a long time, or, you know, again, the timing varies depending on the crop, until it's ready to harvest. So there's a lot of steps. We see that, and it's the same with any kind of creative endeavor. You know, before an artist puts out an album, there's all the dreaming that goes into it, right? There's all the sitting with it. There's having it percolate in the background even before you start all the steps to creating it, right? So this time of year, the sun, in the northern hemisphere, we're past the winter solstice, which means the sun is actually returning. So we are actually no longer in the time of compost, in spite of what people tell you. We are actually in the time of growth, but it's not the kind of growth that we've come to associate with growth. It's actually that seeding growth. So it's the growth that happens quietly, slowly, in the dark. And so it might include some vision boarding. It might include dreaming, listening, divination. It might just include being slower and more quiet, but also still aware, right? Because here's why I think it actually really matters that when we're ready, you know, when we've kind of gone through these steps and we're ready to kind of come to this deeper layer of seasonal reconnection, the reason I think this matters is because it's not just about us personally, individually feeling better, right? Part of the reason we're burning out, part of the reason we're really struggling is that our society is not set up for creatures. So in order to not just keep putting band-aids on us feeling better, we have to actually shift things internally until we can embody something so different that our society just changes to reflect how we're embodying. So it becomes not just us personally feeling better, but it becomes fundamentally changing how we perceive the world, unlearning some of this internalized empire, this internalized capitalism, so that we can become capable of envisioning, of dreaming, of building, of co-creating, right? Of expressing, of being in different relationship with the world around us. So yes, rest at this time of year, but also think of this time as a time of growth. Because, and again, not the like pushy, fast-paced, massive outward growth, inner growth. Because if we don't acknowledge the subtle beginnings of things, if we wait until something is in its most fully expressed state before we acknowledge it, then we're constantly feeling like we're behind, right? We're constantly feeling like we're reacting or responding to the world, rather than that we're actually in an empowered place where we're co-creating it. So by the time spring comes, we will be more outward facing, but the outward facing will be the kind of outward facing that will be reflective of the seeds we plant now. The spring new beginnings aren't just this like, right, draw a line in the sand, step across it, everything's new. Sometimes we might do that in ceremony, right, as a symbolic like gesture to kind of help us really move into something, or a cord cutting, or, you know, but in general, that's not actually how life works. So if you're hoping to see changes in the spring when things get more outward facing, if you're hoping to start growing in a different direction, then start seeding it now. Pick one small shift that you can make, right? Internally, maybe even. Maybe it's just even in how you're imagining your life or yourself, right? And start living that. And then when the energy of spring starts to really swell up and we're ready for more, we have more of that fire, we're ready for more of that movement, we've already started laying the groundwork. It's not going to be this abrupt departure. We're not going to have to throw our past self like under the bus. You know, we'll be able to say, hey, past self, you know, we've made some mistakes, but we've also started making the changes that we want to see now. And we're more set up. And then we're actually growing with the seasons even more than if we're just right, here we are in winter. So now I'm in winter. Oh, shit, now it's spring. Okay, I'm in spring mode now. Oh, shit, you know, we're moving with it. Because one of the things I found, at least in kind of more of the if we want to call it Celtic, but the Gaelic, the Northern Isles ancestral traditions, if you go back far enough, and I think this is probably true for other cultures too, but that's the one I've studied the most, so those are the ones I'm kind of speaking to here. One of the trends I'm noticing is that they start to acknowledge the changes before they've arrived. Because part of our role as humans is to help call in what's going to happen. It'll probably happen anyway. And yet, maybe not, you know? What if part of helping spring come is us preparing for it, is us anticipating its arrival? And that's not to say don't be here now. That's not to say we're like living in the future, right? But it's knowing that what we're doing here now might be helping call spring in when it's ready. What we're doing now is honoring the season of winter in its place in the entire cycle, right? So there's probably more I could ramble on about, but I'll leave that there for now. Yeah, just to kind of plant that seed, you know. A lot of cultures, old ancient cultures, believed that the new day actually starts at sunset. Because again, they would have known whether it was in the womb, whether it was in the soil, all new life, all new beginnings, all new growth actually begins first in darkness. So if we're waiting to pay attention to what we're growing until it's already light, we're too late, you know? And I don't mean that in some like that we can get it wrong, but just that we're not actually in rhythm. We're gonna always feel like we're being dragged along by it and reacting and responding rather than consciously co-creating, consciously engaging with it. So, okay. Yeah, enough for that. I'll leave that here. Yeah, if you appreciate this take, if you're finding that this offers maybe some extra nuance or some depth or something that you haven't seen elsewhere that's resonating, you know, please give it a like, please share it, you know, help me spread the word. And just know too, if you're interested in this kind of stuff, like stick around, because I've been slowly building out, I'm hoping in these hibernating days to kind of be able to lean more into that seeding things in the dark and complete some self-paced things that I'm working on that are going to kind of help flesh some of these ideas out and help be something you can follow along with. If, you know, coming out of burnout, coming back in line with this rhythm of aliveness, with this kind of seasonal living is something that speaks to you. So thanks, take care, and happy hibernating if you are in the Northern Hemisphere. But hibernate and know that even bears, quick side note, even bears, they hibernate and they come out in the spring with cubs. So they're growing even while they're hibernating. So yeah, hibernate and grow. But grow quietly, grow non-capitalistically, grow like a creature, grow like nature.